Thank you very much. Let me bring in James Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Just to return to the operational independence question, Chris Hopson first, please. Do you think that actually there's an extent to which currently there are informal arrangements taking place? So in other words, opaque discussions between politicians and NHS England, for instance. And so therefore, is there an argument that the white paper proposals might actually increase transparency?
Well, I think transparency is really important, but I think, and the chair and I have had lots of conversations about this, about the nature of the relationship between the Secretary of State and NHS England. And the reality is that the Secretary of State does have full parliamentary accountability, quite rightly, for the spending of £130 billion of public money. I mean, this is one of our major public services. Equally, though, the 2012 Act did quite deliberately give a degree of operational independence to the NHS. And what happens is, our observation looking in from the outside is that there is, as you would expect, a day by day and week by week, dialogue that goes on between the Secretary of State and NHS England about what should happen. And we've tried to bring transparency to that through the publication of a clear mandate that effectively kind of sets out what needs to be delivered. And that seems to us to be a very important kind of mechanism. So as I was saying earlier, in terms of in relation to what is proposed here, the bit that feels uncomfortable is the idea that the Secretary of State should be able to direct the Chief Executive of NHS England to do things that the Chief Executive and the leaders of NHS England feel is inappropriate without there being a degree of transparency. And as you well know, James, there is a formal system in Whitehall that if you get to the point where you do need to instruct somebody to do something, then you do need to make that transparent. And I see the argument that can end up being a bit of a very high threshold, and actually therefore means that that's quite difficult to use if you're a politician. But I do think that if politicians are going to have the power to direct NHS England to do things they don't want to do, there should be a degree of transparency around it, because that's how it should work.
Understood. But as the number one domestic priority for many voters, is it not right that if the Secretary of State is essentially held to account for the operation and the performance of the NHS, that they should have the ability to intervene more so?
This is where the terms of the debate are, and which is why we haven't come out and said, no, we're opposed full stop to the idea of the Secretary of State having more powers in this area. That the key is, as I said on a couple of occasions, is the devil is in the detail here. And I hope you would agree that with the 5 areas I listed around resource allocation, use of drugs, etc., service reconfigurations, we just need to be very careful to allow single individual politicians who inevitably, quite understandably, have got party political interests, excessive power over exactly how the NHS operates day to day. So there's a really important debate here, and we're very, very keen to join it, but we can't really do so until we see what the detail of the proposal is.
Fair enough. And Danny Mortimer, do you have any comments to add on this area?
I think clearly there's an element in which the Act has to tidy up some fairly complicated arrangements that are left over from the previous Act. The 3 national regulators that were established, Monitor, the Trust Development Authority, and the NHS Commissioning Board, all have different lines of accountability. So there's it's important that that's made properly clear and tidied up. I think the points about transparency are really important, and I think there has to be absolute clarity. And I think you're right, there may well be a certain opaqueness at the moment to those conversations that the Secretary of State and his team have with NHS England and others. And if the Act, I think it's important that the Act sets that transparency. And the NHS can also be clear about those times when, I think particularly for population health and clinical quality reasons, that it disagrees with the instruction that's given. The most successful reconfigurations I've experienced in my career, probably the ones around cardiovascular and cancer services in particular, are ones that have led to demonstrable benefits, demonstrable improvements in outcomes for communities, but have involved services being delivered differently between organisations. And some of the anticipated interventions that there may be around reconfigurations. Again, the experience that I have directly and with our members is that those are always motivated by what clinicians in particular believe is in the best interest of their patients and what it is they can deliver safely for their communities. And there has to be a transparency in terms of any differences of opinion there are there, and also a transparency about the resource implications as well as the quality and safety implications that flow from that.